My husband's new girlfriend wanted to take my daughter's gold jewelry that belonged to my husband's late mother. My name is Rachel, and I'm 38 years old. My ex-husband, Jason, is 39. We were high school sweethearts. Started dating at 18, married at 20, and spent 19 years together before we amicably divorced. We've been separated for 3 years now, and things between us have remained peaceful. We have a wonderful 9-year-old daughter, Lily, who has adjusted remarkably well to the changes in our lives. Jason and I have made it a priority to maintain a stable and friendly co-parenting relationship for her sake. We don't argue, we support each other when needed, and we both agree that Lily's happiness and well-being come first. Jason has moved on, and so have I. He's been in a serious relationship for over a year now with Nicole, a 44-year-old woman who, up until recently, I thought was a great match for him. She's been kind, respectful, and good with Lily. She and I've always gotten along, even celebrating holidays and big events together as one big blended family. At least that's how it was until last week. Jason's parents passed away within a few weeks of each other last fall, and it was devastating for all of us. Even though Jason and I were already divorced at the time, his parents still treated me like family. I love them dearly, and their passing was heartbreaking. When they died, their belongings were divided among their children and grandchildren. Jason's mother had an extensive jewelry collection. Some of it was costume jewelry, but a good portion was fine jewelry, with significant sentimental and monetary value. The responsibility of dividing it up fell to Jason's sister, Sarah, who carefully sorted through everything and sent pieces to the intended recipients. Last week, a package arrived at my house addressed to Lily. Inside was a selection of jewelry from her grandmother, along with a letter explaining that these were meant to be passed down to her when she was older. It was a beautiful gesture, and I immediately called Jason to let him know about it. He told me that some of the jewelry had also been left to me, and that we should go through it together to decide what should be set aside for Lily and what I might want to keep as sentimental keepsakes. I agreed, and we scheduled a time for him to come over. When Jason arrived, Nicole was with him. I didn't mind. She had always been supportive, and given how emotional the situation was, I figured her presence might comfort him. But as we started sorting through the jewelry, I realized something was off. We carefully unwrapped each piece, memories flooding back with every delicate necklace and sparkling ring. Some of the items were sentimental, more valuable for their memories than their cost. All costume jewelry that Lily could have now. Others, however, were clearly heirlooms, valuable pieces meant to stay in the family for generations. Among them was a breathtaking sapphire and diamond set, a necklace and matching earrings that we believed had originally belonged to Jason's grandmother. It was exquisite, and as soon as Nicole saw it, she couldn't take her eyes off it. She held the necklace up against her chest, admiring it in the mirror. "This would go so well with the dress I've been looking at," she mused, smiling at Jason. I raised an eyebrow. A wedding dress? They weren't even engaged, at least not that I knew of. But I let it slide, assuming she was just daydreaming out loud. She continued, running her fingers over the sapphires. "Even if it's not for a wedding, I have a couple of fancy events coming up. This would be perfect for a night out." Jason didn't respond. He simply stared at the jewelry in her hands, his face unreadable. After a moment, she sighed and set the necklace back down. I took that as my cue. Carefully, I rewrapped the sapphire and diamond set and placed it back into the box with the other heirlooms meant for Lily. Nicole didn't say anything else at the time, but her expression lingered in my mind like she was mentally claiming it as her own. That night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Nicole. "Hey, I was thinking, would it be possible for me to borrow the sapphire and diamond set for a special occasion? I'd take great care of it." I frowned at my screen. Borrow it? This wasn't some necklace from a department store. It was a family heirloom meant for my daughter. I replied politely but firmly, "I don't think that's a good idea. The jewelry is meant for Lily when she's older, and I want to keep it safe for her." I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few days, she messaged me several times, asking again and again. At first, she tried to be charming. I promised I'd return it right away. You wouldn't even notice it was gone. Then, she tried to appeal to my sympathy. It would mean so much to me to wear something from Jason's family. I never got to meet them, and this would make me feel closer to them. And when that didn't work, she turned hostile. You're being selfish. You're divorced from Jason, so you don't have any real right to that jewelry. I don't see why you should get to decide who wears it. That one made my blood boil, but the worst was yet to come. Nicole's messages didn't stop. If anything, they became more aggressive. After her initial request to borrow the sapphire and diamond set word denied, she started trying different tactics. First, she attempted to guilt-trip me. This isn't just about me, she wrote one evening. It's about honoring Jason's family. I never got to meet them, and wearing something that belonged to his mother would make me feel connected to them. Don't you think that's important? I ignored the message. The next day, she tried a different approach, manipulation. You're holding on to that jewelry like it's yours, but it's not. Jason and I are going to get married, and when we do, his will legally be part of our marital assets. That includes family heirlooms. You can fight this now, but you're only delaying the inevitable. That one stopped me in my tracks. First, because of the assumption. Jason and Nicole weren't even engaged yet, and she was already talking, like she had a legal claim over his family's possessions. Second, because it reeked of entitlement as if she believed that simply by marrying Jason, she would be entitled to everything connected to his past, including heirlooms meant for his daughter. I took a deep breath before replying, "That's not how this works." The jewelry was left to Lily, Jason, and I both agreed it would be kept safe until she's older. This isn't up for discussion. Nicole's response came within minutes. You just want it for yourself. That's when I realized she wasn't going to stop. And worse, Jason was saying nothing. I had assumed that Jason wasn't aware of Nicole's persistence. But after a week of these texts, it became clear that wasn't the case. At first, I debated whether or not to tell him. Would it cause unnecessary drama? Would it create tension between them? I didn't want to get in the middle of their relationship. But at the same time, I was tired of being harassed. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Jason needed to know who he was dealing with. So I decided to talk to him face to face. Jason came by the house during his lunch break. Nicole wasn't with him, which I took as an opportunity. I need to talk to you about something, I said, keeping my tone neutral. It's about the jewelry. Immediately, his expression darkened. What about it? I hesitated for a second before handing him my phone. Nicole has been messaging me a lot. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to say much. I let him scroll through the messages himself. At first, his face remained neutral. Then his brows furrowed, and his jaw clenched. By the time he reached the last message, the one about the jewelry eventually becoming part of their marital assets, his knuckles had gone wide around the phone. What the hell is this? He muttered under his breath. I was hoping you could tell me, I replied. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared at the screen. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh and rubbed his temple. I had no idea she was doing this. I crossed my arms. Well, she has been, and it's starting to feel like harassment. I don't understand why she's even bringing up marital assets. He muttered, we're not even engaged, so that part isn't true. Of course not, I said. You've talked about marriage, but it's not like you have plans set in stone. I let out a slow breath, relieved that at least one of my concerns was unfounded. But it didn't change the fact that Nicole had been acting like she already owned part of his past. I need to be clear about something, Jason, I said, my voice steady. I don't care if you get married. I want you to be happy. But this jewelry isn't up for debate. It was meant for Lily, and that's where it's staying. Nicole doesn't have a right to it. Not now. Not ever. Jason nodded immediately. I agree, and I'll talk to her. I could tell he was frustrated, and a part of me felt bad for him. He looked genuinely blindsided by Nicole's behavior. Still, that didn't change the fact that he needed to handle it, because if he didn't, I would. Even though Jason assured me he would talk to Nicole, I wasn't willing to take any risks. That night, I took action. The jewelry had been sitting in a lockbox at my house, one that both Jason and I had keys to. That had always been fine before, but now I didn't trust that Nicole wouldn't try something. The next morning, I went to a local bank and rented a safety deposit box not at the bank where I usually do business, but somewhere separate where no one would think to look. I placed every heirloom inside except for one necklace. I kept for sentimental reasons. Everything else, including the ruby and diamond, set that Nicole had been so fixated on, was now locked away, safe from interference, and I was the only one with the key. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but I felt an overwhelming sense of relief knowing no one could access them now. A few days passed, and Nicole didn't message me again, which I assumed meant that Jason had followed through on his promise to talk to her. But while Nicole's silence was a relief, Jason's was concerning. He had completely stopped responding to my texts unless it was about Lily. That was a red flag. And it made me wonder, was he just trying to avoid conflict? Or was he realizing something about Nicole that he didn't want to admit? The answer came sooner than I expected. Jason showed up at my house again the following week, looking exhausted. "We need to talk," he said. And from the look on his face, I knew something had shifted. Jason sat on my couch, rubbing his face like he was trying to wipe away whatever thoughts were haunting him. I could tell he hadn't been sleeping well. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual calm demeanor was cracked. I sat across from him, arms crossed. "What's going on, Jason?" He let out a deep breath and finally looked up. "I talked to Nicole." I leaned back slightly, and she didn't take it well. I wasn't surprised. She kept insisting that it didn't make sense to just let the jewelry sit there. He continued, "She doesn't understand why it's such a big deal." "She does understand," I corrected. "She just doesn't care." Jason didn't argue that was a first. Instead, he exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. "She accused you of being controlling, of trying to keep some kind of power over me through this jewelry." I scoffed. "That's ridiculous." "I know," he admitted. "I told her that this wasn't about you or me. It was about Lily. The jewelry belongs to her. End of story." "And what did she say to that?" Jason hesitated. "She started crying. Said she felt like she wasn't being accepted as part of the family." I let out a bitter laugh. "So her way of being accepted is to try and claim something that doesn't belong to her." "I don't know," Jason muttered. But it got worse. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Jason rubbed his temples before answering. "She told me she should have some say over family heirlooms, because she's going to be my wife one day." I froze, and when I told her we weren't even engaged yet, she lost it. I raised an eyebrow. Wait, she assumed marriage was already happening. Jason nodded grimly. "She said she thought we were on that path. And when I told her I hadn't made any final decisions about marriage yet, she said that if I wasn't serious about committing to her, she wasn't sure where this relationship was going." I let out a slow breath. There it was. This wasn't just about the jewelry. It was about control. Nicole had assumed she was well on her way to locking Jason down into marriage. And when she realized he wasn't as committed as she thought, she panicked. "So, what now?" I asked. Jason hesitated. "I don't know." I studied his face. He was torn. He wasn't just dealing with Nicole's possessiveness. He was also dealing with the emotional fallout of realizing she wasn't who he thought she was. "You know, this isn't just about the jewelry, right?" I asked carefully. Jason gave me a tired look. "Yeah, I'm starting to see that." For a few days, things were quiet. I didn't hear from Jason or Nicole, and I assumed he was still trying to sort things out. But then, out of nowhere, Nicole texted me again. I stared at my phone in disbelief before opening the message. "I know we've had our differences, but I really think we should talk one-on-one. Can we meet for coffee?" I frowned. Part of me wanted to ignore her. The other part of me wanted to hear what she had to say, if only to see how far she was willing to go. Against my better judgment, I replied, "Fine, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. at the coffee shop on Main." I figured a public place was the safest option. The next morning, I walked into the cafe and found Nicole already sitting at a table, stirring her coffee like she was trying to build up the courage to speak. I sat across from her and waited. She glanced up at me, her expression unreadable. "I just want to clear the air." I raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" She sighed. "Look, I get why you're protective over the jewelry, but you have to understand, it's hard for me. Jason and I are building a future together, and I want to feel like I belong in his life." I kept my expression neutral. "You don't need Lily's inheritance to do that." Nicole tensed slightly but kept her voice calm. I would have returned it, "You know, I just wanted to wear it for one night." I shook my head. "That's not the point, Nicole. The point is you felt entitled to something that doesn't belong to you. She pursed her lips. I just wanted to feel included. Then find another way, I said firmly. Because trying to pressure me into handing over family heirlooms, isn't it? She went quiet, stirring her coffee again. Then, after a long pause, she said something that made my stomach turn. You and Jason still have too much power over each other. I stared at her. Excuse me? She met my gaze, her expression unreadable. You say this is about Lily. Maybe it is. But you and Jason still act like a team. You make decisions together. You trust each other more than anyone else, and you still protect each other. She tilted her head slightly. Where does that leave me? I let out a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so revealing. This isn't about the jewelry at all, is it? I said, it's about the fact that Jason and I still have a strong co-parenting relationship. And that bothers you? Nicole didn't deny it. Instead, she simply looked away. It just feels like I'll always be second place to your little family. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my patience. Nicole, I don't care if you marry. Jason, I don't care if you to have a wonderful life together. But Lily will always come first. And if you can't handle that, then maybe you're with the wrong person. Nicole clenched her jaw. I love Jason. Then prove it by respecting his daughter's inheritance. She didn't respond. After a long pause, she stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked away without another word. I didn't know what Nicole would do next, but I had a feeling her relationship with Jason wasn't going to last much longer. Sure enough, a few days later, Jason showed up at my house again, this time looking even worse than before. She's furious, he admitted. She thinks you're trying to turn me against her. I rolled my eyes. I haven't said a word to you about your relationship. That's all on her. Jason sighed. She said if I don't propose soon, she's not sure if this is going to work out. I leaned forward. What do you want? Jason hesitated, then finally exhaled and ran a hand over his face. I don't know anymore. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about the jewelry. This was about Nicole trying to force her way into a place that didn't belong to her. And Jason finally realizing it. Jason sat on my couch, looking like a man caught in a storm he hadn't seen coming. For the first time since all of this started, I saw real doubt in his eyes, not just about the jewelry, but about Nicole, their future, and everything she had been pushing for. She told me last night that she feels like she's competing with you, he admitted. I folded my arms. She's not competing with me, Jason. She's competing with reality. She doesn't want a partnership. She wants control. Jason sighed heavily. I told her that our co-parenting relationship is non-negotiable, that Lily comes first, and if she couldn't accept that, then maybe we weren't the right match. My eyebrows lifted slightly. And she got angry? He nodded. She said I was prioritizing my past over my future. I shook my head. Your past, Jason? Lily isn't your past, she's your child. I know. His voice was tired. And I told her that. But she just kept saying that she felt like she would never truly have a place in my life, as long as I was still so close to you. I sat back, exhaling. So what are you going to do? Jason didn't answer right away. Instead, he rubbed his face with both hands, looking like a man at the edge of a decision he wasn't ready to make. After what felt like forever, he finally looked up at me and said, I think I already know. I didn't expect things to escalate, but Nicole wasn't done yet. That night, Jason called me again, this time with urgency in his voice. She's at my house right now, he said, and she just dropped a bomb on me. I gripped my phone. What happened? She said she's done with all that disrespect, that if I can't set boundaries with you and stop letting you control things, then she's walking away. I blinked. Wait, she's trying to make you choose. Basically, Jason let out a bitter chuckle. She told me to prove my commitment to our future by getting the jewelry from you, that if I really wanted to move forward with her, I wouldn't let my ex-wife have so much say over our family's legacy. I nearly dropped my phone. She what? She told me to either bring her the jewelry or she's done. My stomach turned. This wasn't just about greed. This was about power. Nicole wasn't just after the heirlooms. She was testing Jason, seeing if he would put her over me and Lily, and for the first time since all of this started, I felt something I hadn't before: rage. I took a deep breath. And what did you say? Jason hesitated. I told her no. A slow, quiet relief spread through my chest. She flipped out, he continued. Said I was choosing you over her. That I was letting my ex control my decisions. That I wasn't willing to truly commit to her. I closed my eyes. Then Jason let out a long breath. Then she packed a bag and left. It was over. Jason and Nicole broke up that night. He told me later that he sat with the decision for hours, questioning if he had done the right thing. But deep down, he knew she was never really in this for Lily, was she? I shook my head. No, she was in it for control. She wanted you to prove something to put her above everything else in your life. Jason exhaled, shaking his head. I feel like an idiot. You're not an idiot, I said gently. You just wanted to believe she was the person you thought she was. We sat in silence for a moment before he finally spoke again. I thought she was good for me. I sighed, so did I. And that was the truth. I had genuinely believed Nicole was a good match for him. She had seemed patient, kind, and respectful until she wasn't. Jason leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling. I should have seen the signs. You did see them, I pointed out. And when you realized what was really going on, you made the right choice. That's what matters. He nodded slowly. I guess. Then, after a moment, he turned to me. So, what happens to the jewelry now? I smiled slightly. It's safe. Jason gave me a knowing look. You moved it, didn't you? I nodded. Yep, it's in a bank vault. No one but me has access to it. Jason chuckled. Smart. Then, more seriously, he said, I appreciate you protecting it for Lily. I nodded. I always will. Because, at the end of the day, that was the only thing that mattered, not Nicole, not her manipulation, not her desperation to stake a claim in a family that wasn't even hers. What mattered was Lily's future, and no one, not Nicole, was going to take that away from her. A few weeks passed. Jason seemed lighter, freer, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Nicole didn't try to contact him again. She was gone, just like that. And while Jason was hurt, I knew deep down that he would be okay. One evening, as Lily and I were getting ready for bed, she looked up at me and asked, Mommy, do I really get to have Grandma's jewelry when I'm older? I smiled and kissed her forehead. Of course, sweetheart. It's all yours. And when you're ready, I'll tell you all about each piece. Who they belong to, the stories behind them. She grinned. I can't wait. And neither could I because, unlike Nicole, I knew that some things aren't meant to be claimed. They're meant to be cherished. And Lily would cherish them just like her grandmother did. Just like they were always meant to be.